Hello and welcome back to the Why I Stay podcast, the podcast where we discover why we stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I really, really love this. And so I'm so grateful for you guys for being here. If you don't mind, will you please think about someone, whether it's yourself or someone you know who might be willing to come on this podcast? I am shamelessly asking for more people to come on. I want your stories and I want to hear your faith. So if you have anybody in mind, please email me at whyistaypodcast@gmail.com and we will get that set up. Okay, without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce my friend Emma, who is with us here tonight. Emma, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.
The way this podcast works, people, if you've never been here before, is that I will first ask Emma a series of rapid fire questions to get to know her better. Then we'll go into the exploratory questions where Emma answers questions about her church experience. And then everybody gets the final question of why do you stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? So if I had a drum roll noise, I'd kick that in right here. We are going to start. Are you ready, Emma?
Yes.
Here we go. How old are you?
I am 29 years old.
Do you have any nicknames?
Not really. It's a pretty short name, so it's hard to make a nickname of it.
Totally. What's your favorite food?
So delicious. Does that count?
It's liquid food.
Yeah.
What's your favorite soda from that place?
I used to really like Southern Gentleman, but then COVID changed my taste buds, and now I don't have a set one. But I do really like the Allison Show, but in Dr. Pepper instead of Diet Coke.
Ooh, that sounds delicious. What is your favorite calling you've ever had?
I was Young Women's Secretary for like 3 months before my husband went to law school and we moved away from the ward, and I was very sad.
What is a controversial opinion that you hold? Like everybody loves Crocs, but you hate them.
I don't always think that Costco is worth it.
Right?
And I think that's pretty controversial, especially as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yep. I totally agree. Like you go in, you think that you're going to get like some really great deals, and it depends on what you get. But I honestly, you can't spend less than $100 there. It's like impossible. What is your biggest dream?
I think I would really love to expand my writing career. And I think writing for church magazines would be awesome. I've worked for the church before and I loved it. So that would be amazing. Actually, but then my other biggest dream is that if I had $1 million, I would go back to nursing school. Well, go to nursing school and become a midwife.
Cool. Last question. What is something about you that is the same now as it was when you were in high school?
Well, I helped plan the high school reunion, so I guess I'm still a part of student council.
You never get out of that job. Yeah. Never. You'll be 92 and they're still going to call you up for stuff.
There will still be student council duties. Yes.
Did you know when you were signing up that this was going to follow you for the rest of your life?
I mean, I kind of did. I didn't expect it to follow me as much as it has, because I wasn't the class president. So I was like, oh, I'll help with the reunion, but like I won't be like running it. But it ended up that there was a very select number of us running it. So no.
Cool. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to our exploratory questions. And Emma, the first one that you've chosen to talk about tonight is, when is a time that you have had to have courage in your discipleship?
So I did the Disney College program after my freshman year at BYU. And it was really, really fun, except for the fact that I dated this guy. So I was like, 18? And I think it was some like really big number that of an age difference. Let's just say it was not the best experience. He was probably like borderline abusive, and it was a really, really hard thing. After I broke up with him, he was just like awful. And so I was talking to my roommates about it, who were all like BYU people. They like put us all together, thankfully. And they were like, well, maybe you should go talk to the bishop about like him so that they like are aware. And so I don't know that I had ever like approached something like that with a bishop. So my roommate went with me, bless her heart, and we sat down in the bishop's office, and I kind of told her what had happened, about how like it was literally like the very first like activity that we went to when we got to Florida, that he like singled me out and was like intent on dating me and like wouldn't like take no, essentially. And so I told him all of that. And I was like, and then like things just really escalated and it was really bad. And he was like kind of abusive. And he was like, well, yeah, I think like maybe this has been a problem multiple times, which like was like kind of floored me because you would think in a situation like that they would like kick somebody out of the YSA, especially because just how that ward functioned, there were young BYU kids coming in and out like constantly. Like it was just like a fresh rotation like every semester. So that was like terrifying for me, but I'm really glad that I did it because I mean, I hope that it at least prevented it from happening again. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just glad that I stood up so that hopefully it didn't have something that happened to me didn't have to happen to somebody else.
That does take a lot of courage, especially in an environment where maybe sometimes we don't feel like people will believe us, you know what I mean? Like, or if, you don't know how it's going to be received and there could be a lot of fallout anyway, I do agree
Well,
that it's a lot of courage.
it's so hard as like a young 19-year-old girl to like go into like a 65-year-old man who's like an Imagineer for Disney. Like he had like some amazing job, and like be like, hey, like I was a naive little girl who like got into this relationship that was terrible and like took a while to figure out that like it was really bad and get out of it. It's just hard. And it's, yeah, the whole situation was tricky and it is a hard thing to do to like talk to somebody and just like essentially hope that they believe you.
What advice would you give if someone's listening and they're in a similar experience or having a similar experience as you? What advice would you give to them?
So the thing that really saved Mike in that experience is that he had a older brother who was married to a gal, and I can't remember if I reached out to her or if she reached out to me, but somehow we connected. And as it turned out, her husband had a lot of the same problems that he did. And so she was just really frank with me and said, like, you need to get out now. She's like, I love my husband, but like, I don't think you want this kind of life for yourself. So that was like so helpful. And I think my big thing is that I really believe in people's power of their stories to like help other people. And I think when you share stories, and I've seen this time and again in my life, that as you share stories, more people come to you and trust you and are willing to talk to you about their problems, and you can give them better advice because you've been through a certain experience. So I would say like finding people, and obviously like it can be hard to find people like that. But like, in my situation, like she was married to his brother. So like that was kind of easy. I was able to get in touch with her and be like, hey, is this normal? Like, is this what the family is like? So I think finding people that share your situation and truly just asking for help, like if you can't find somebody like that.
Thank you. All right. The next question is, what is one experience that has really increased your maturity in the gospel?
So like I said, my husband is in law school currently. He graduates in like 3 weeks. And all through law school, we had my first kid. He was like 2.5 when we went to law school. And then I got pregnant during the first year of law school, and we had our second child at the end of the first year. And we have felt just like incredibly led by the Spirit throughout the whole law school process. Like even in going to school, like it was very much like my husband just felt like it was something he needed to do. We've kind of relied on the Spirit a lot. And so I would say that all of law school has been. But this last year of law school, like trying to find a job has really, truly like been such like an amazing like experience in following the promptings of the Spirit. We've been trying to move out of Arizona forever. We wanted to go to law school out of Arizona, didn't feel like we should. So we went to Tucson, to the University of Arizona. Like after we graduated from BYU, we had gone to Texas for a while. A job there didn't work out, so we ended up back in Arizona. Like we just have been trying to leave Arizona for a very long time. And so when we were looking for jobs out of law school, we were trying to leave as well. That's really hard to do because when you go to a school like the University of Arizona, it's not like you're like going to Harvard. If you go to Harvard, you can get a job wherever the heck you want. When you go to the University of Arizona, their network is much more confined to the University of Arizona areas. So like, Utah, California, Arizona, but we didn't want to go any of those places. So we really had to do the legwork ourselves, which is really something that I took on because my husband was so busy with school. And as we were doing it, like we just felt prompted to do thing after thing. And now that we have our job in Georgia, like deciding where to live was like a really big thing. When we got the job, I just kept like hearing this name of a town in my head. And I was like, this is crazy, but like, I think we should go to this town. And the town, like right next door, has like better ranked schools, like everything seems seemingly better. But it was just like every time I would look at a house in that area, it's like, no, like we should be in this other town. And so we ended up buying a house in like this other town, going to a school that's not as highly ranked, but like I truly feel and know that like we're supposed to be there. As we followed these promptings and had them fulfilled, I guess, for lack of a better term, like that has really grown my maturity in the gospel and in my ability to listen to the promptings of the Spirit.
A few years ago, President Nelson said, I encourage you to increase your ability to hear the Spirit, your spiritual capacity, like do the work necessary to. And I've realized the same thing as you, that as you follow promptings, they might not pan out exactly how you think, or you might not understand why. But the more you listen and act, even if you don't see them resolved, you can hear the Spirit more clearly. And sometimes like names keep coming back to your head very clearly, which are things that, I mean, I haven't enjoyed that type of spiritual like volume, I guess, my whole life until just recently when I've really like knuckled down and tried to do that. So that's really cool that you have that experience and that you're on a path, like you're on a trajectory of being able to have more, which is so exciting and cool. And I just want to echo you. We did the same thing with the school with our kids in Boston, and we didn't know why, but over and over again, I've seen us grow. And there have been a lot of times where we're just like, why did we choose this school? Actually, but like over and over again, as time went on, like we've seen huge blessings from that. So power to you.
One thing about spiritual promptings is that I think the Lord takes into account like what we want. Like, so I work at a pickleball center right now, and there's these two, like they're called pros that like they teach the lessons and stuff, and they are both transplants from San Francisco. And so like they have no family here, you know, they don't really have any connections. And it was Easter weekend, you know, this past weekend. And I was like, I kept feeling like I should invite them to my family's like Easter. Neither of them are religious. Like it's kind of, I mean, not that like our Easter Sunday is super religious. And so I kept putting off. And then I finally did. And as it happened, neither of them could make it, which I feel like, you know, the Lord was glad that I followed the prompting. It's the doing it that matters, you know, the following up on the prompting, even though you're like, I really don't want to do this. And then like nothing comes of it. And you're like, okay, well, what was the point? And I think sometimes the point is just that you do it.
Totally. And it reminds me of the quote, and I don't know who has said it. It was like, God didn't need to learn something about Abraham. Abraham needed to learn something about himself. You know, Abraham needed to learn something about Abraham. And I think God knows whether or not we're going to follow the promptings he gives us. He knows, like, it's not going to surprise him whether or not we act on it, but sometimes it does surprise us. Like, especially with awkward things, like inviting people to Easter or inviting them to church, things that we're not used to. Like sometimes we just need to get used to the inviting. And that means going through times where people say no, or sometimes when it's like awkward. And that doesn't mean it wasn't a prompting. It just means that you needed to learn something from this and to show yourself if you were actually going to go through with it. So I'm glad you did. And I'm glad you brought that up. All right. So the third exploratory question I've got for you is, what makes you so excited about the gospel of Jesus Christ? What aspects of it really light you up?
So like I said, I'm really a story people. I was an English major at BYU. And then I had the opportunity to work for the church history library in Salt Lake right after I graduated. And if I learned anything from there, it's that everybody has a story to share, and every story is important to the Lord. I think a little known fact about the church history library is that they collect everybody's story. So like literally it doesn't matter what you've done or not done in your life. They want your journals and like your letters, and they want to do an oral history interview with you so that they can collect the record like they were commanded to in D&C. As I have like kind of like lived that, it's just been interesting to like see how people are willing to open up. But so stories really excite me. But what also excites me is just like the future of the church. I think sometimes people get worried about the future of the church, that like people are falling away so much, and that there's like not going to be that much interest in it. But as I was listening to conference with my husband, I had this realization that like we are no longer the rising generation. For
No,
yeah, for so long it was like when they talked about the rising generation, I was like, oh, that's us.
that's
Like
us.
it feels so good to be talked about so much and like to see that the brethren have faith. But then I was in Relief Society literally the next Sunday, and a bunch of moms, because we're in my in-laws ward, so it's a lot of older, more established people who have like teenagers. And a bunch of them were talking about how concerned they are about their teenagers and like how they don't really know what to do. And it's such a like, they're so worried about the world and about what their teenagers are going to do in the world. And I like raised my hand and I was like, I realize that I'm not the rising generation and your kids are. Like your teenagers are who the brethren are still saying are going to do so much good. I was like, so there's a lot of crap, especially that teenagers face. The brethren still have confidence. Like they aren't saying like this rising generation is really gonna fail us. They're saying like this rising generation is gonna do good in the world and they are going to make the church successful. And so that is what really makes me happy. And I think just like as we all grow in the church and we become more firm in the church, we will be able to see that more, and we will be able to like push away the darkness and the quote unquote scariness that people see in the world and see the good and like the faith of those around us, and that will help us lift everybody to make it a better church.
We think about like, oh, it's the kids that we see and the mistakes that they're making, but this church isn't about the individual and what they can do on their own. It's always been about what the individual can do with Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, this rising generation, like you and I, we just like eked by and got out alive without having like constant social media and phones, that kind of thing. We just barely missed that terrible, awful thing.
Yeah.
We know enough to like know the dangers and stuff, and we can realize that like, okay, yeah, we're addicted to social media. Like we can see it, but we didn't have to go through that. And what is the Lord just going to let this entire generation of children and teenagers just like fall by the wayside? Like, too bad. Your parents didn't know how to deal with technology and give it to you at appropriate times. Like,
yeah.
Are you all doomed? No, of course not. Right? Like, yes, they will have unique challenges and they might have really bumpy, rocky paths dealing with different things like mental illness, and whatever comes with the unique challenges, but it's nothing new to the Lord.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to note that like the Lord doesn't set out to doom people, like
never.
His whole purpose is that we may have joy, that we may be happy. I think life is really incredibly and heartbreakingly unfair sometimes. And like that doesn't make a lot of sense. We have to know that like it will all be made perfect. We will all have a perfect understanding eventually. And we are not doomed. Whatever you're facing, it does not mean doom and gloom for your whole entire life.
It's so optimistic. And I love the way you just said that, because I was just listening to the Latter-day Saint Women podcast. They had President Joy Jones of the general primary presidency on there. And they were asking her, like, how do you have faith in the future when things look so scary? But the way you just put it, it's just like, yes, we can push forward and be optimistic. And why not? We're on the Lord's side. Out of everybody in the world, we should be the ones with the most to be excited about the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so that concludes our exploratory questions, which means that we just are at this last question for you, Emma. Why do you stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
This is something, so I'm just going to make like a selfish plug. I started a newsletter with the same intention of like why specifically millennials are staying in the church, because I just have seen so many people leave. And I feel like those are the stories that get shared all the time and not so much the people who are staying. And so we are very much in the same vein there. And so I've talked about it a lot with my husband, because actually the very first interview I did, I totally forgot to ask that question of the person. But we've talked a lot about why we stay. And I love the gospel with my whole heart. Like I literally don't know what I would do with it. It has been my anchor through the darkest times of my life. And if I didn't have the gospel, I would just be miserable. I would see the doom and gloom, and it would just look like doom and gloom to me with no hope at all. So obviously my testimony of the gospel helps me stay, but I also just feel like the church is my whole being. Like if I didn't have the church, like I'm not even sure where I would make friends, what I would do with my life. The church is such a built-in way to do all of those things that create a strong safety net and a strong society, and like just make your life happier. And so I'm so grateful for that, for the church. And I'm so grateful for the gospel that I just like, it doesn't make sense to leave to me, you know? And I know a lot of people feel differently and I empathize with them. But like for me and for my family and for my husband, the church makes sense. And we have a testimony of it. And ultimately, our testimony is why we stay in the church.
Emma, thank you so much for your time here tonight and for your faith and all the good that you are doing. I know that it will make a difference because every single piece of what we're doing is going to count. And I think one of the amazing things about collecting testimonies like we do, and your experience in the church history department, you see that when you write stuff down and when you say it out loud, it gives it more power. And it gives it this tangibility that gives it stay power, you know,
Yeah.
and it lasts. So I'm grateful for what you're doing, and thanks again for being on this podcast.
Yeah, no problem. I loved being here.
And that concludes my interview with Emma. Guys, isn't that so awesome? I loved hearing that about the church history archives and the department because, you know, my ward historian life, I had to collect the ward history, which was really cool. And I think whether you want to come on this podcast or not, I think it is important that we voice why we stay. So I challenge you this week just to tell somebody, whether you want to put it on social media or share it in a nice, safe environment with a family member or a friend. I challenge you this week to go and say why you stay. Even if you're just looking in the mirror and you just say it out loud, I stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because you'll see that there is more power to your faith and more power to your words as you express it out loud. And you will feel that strengthening effect going through your whole entire body. And there will be great things ahead for you. So thank you for that. And if you like this episode, I'd love for you to share it with the world if you would be so kind, whether it's on social media or with a friend through text. I would really appreciate that. There's nothing to this podcast without you and your support. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for staying with us.